Aboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Gimel Amud Beis, starting with Gimel Amud Aleph, 8 lines from the bottom. After the Gemara had concluded that according to everybody, when it says in the Mishnah, or La'ar Ba'asar, it means the night of the 14th of Nisan, one is obligated to make Bedikas Chometz. If so, ask the Gemara, why does the Tana choose to use a language of or La'ar Ba'asar, not teach Laila, the night of Ar Ba'asar? Answers the Gemara, because the Tana wants to open up the Masechta with a lashon, an expression that is considered to be refined, or because Laila has a connotation as pejorative, as a negative connotation, and therefore want to use the word or, light, as a euphemism for the night of the 14th. Says the Gemara, Tanya, the Bei Rabbi Yishmael, Lo oilam yisaper odam beloshon nikia. A person should always speak with a refined language. Sheharei bezav karu merkav, ubeisha karu moishav. When it comes to the zav, the male who has the tuma of ziva, there the Torah says merkav. The pasuk I'll read you says the following: V'chol ha-merkav asher yirkav alav hazav yitma, and all of the saddle that the Zov rides on, that he sits on, will become Tameh. He will miltameh the saddle when he rides on the saddle. And yet when it says, when it comes to a woman who is a Ziva, when she's metameh, it doesn't use the word merkav. The pasuk says, V'im al hamishkov, who, or on the seat, or al hakli, or the vessel, asher yosheves alov, that she sits upon, benogu bo yitma ad harev. When it comes to a zav or a zava, they are both metame when they sit or when they lean on an object, even if indeed they don't have physical contact with it. For example, there's layers that they're sitting upon, all of it becomes tameh. Yet when it comes to the man, it refers to the zav as merkav, which means that he's saddling, he's sitting on a saddle which requires pisuk raglayim, that his legs are spread. By a woman who's a zava, the Torah does not want to use such an expression, and therefore says that she's sitting on something. Says the Gemara, V'oimer, and it also states, V'tivcha loshen arumim, and you shall choose a loshen expression of the chachamim. V'oimer, and it states, V'das fosai baru milelu, and my lips should speak a refined knowledge. Ask the Gemara, my v'oimer, why wasn't it enough to bring the first as the proof when the Torah said that it says by zav merkov, and by a zava, by a woman, it states mishkov. It states Moishov. Why does the Torah then, why does the Gemara now bring in the Braisa two additional proofs? V'chitema, says the Gemara, Nani mili b'daraisa. That's only true when it comes to the Torah, that the Torah has to speak in a refined way. Ava b'drabanan loy. But when it comes to Mishnayis and Braisis, then it's not necessary. Toshma, therefore it brings V'oimer v'tivcha loshen arumim, and you shall choose a language of the Chacham, which is a refined type of expression. You'll say that's true when it comes to the Chachamim, in the Mishnayis and the Braisis. But in a regular worldly expression, when it comes to mundane language, it doesn't have to be refined. Therefore the pasuk says that my lips, in a mundane way, even regular expression, should also express with a pure, refined type of knowledge. Ask the Gemara, Uviisha loksi ba merkov, but it does not state by a woman in other places, merkov. V'haksi, behold, it states in the pasuk, Vatokam Rivka v'na'aroiseho, Vatirkavno ala gemalim. It states that Rivka, she was roicheves on the gamal, on the camel. Answers the Gemara, Hasam mishum bi asuso de gemalim orchahi. When it comes to sitting on a gamal, even a woman has to straddle the gamal because it's high up, and she's liable to fall down and be injured. Therefore, it's not considered to be meguna when it speaks about a woman who is roicheves on the gamal, as opposed to when a woman is sitting on a horse or a donkey, she sits with both legs on one side. Vahaksiv asked the Gemara further, Vayikach Moshe es ishtoi vezbona vayarkivem ala chamor. Here it states in the pasuk that Moshe took his sons and his wife, and he put them, and they were rochvim ala chamor, which implies that they saddled on the chamor. Answers the Gemara, Hasom mishum bonav orchahu. There it's because of the bonim that states that they were rochvim. But in regards to his wife, she didn't sit in that fashion. On top of Gimel Amud Beis. I asked the Gemara further, V'hi roicheves ala chamor. It talks about when the daughter of Shaul HaMelech, when she was sitting, it was roicheves ala chamor. Avigal was coming down the mountain on a chamor, and the pasuk states that she was roicheves, implying that she was saddling the chamor. Answers the Gemara, Hasam mishum bi asusa delelia orchahu. There, because of the fear of the night, she had to then straddle the chamor, otherwise she'd be in danger. So therefore it's considered to be not a problem of a lack of refinement. V'ibois eima mishum bi isusa delelia leko. Or, Gemara says, alternatively, it's not because of her fear of the night. Rather, mishum biyasusa di David ika, because of her fear, she was coming to plead before David HaMelech as not to punish her husband. V'bois eima biyasusa di David nami leka. Or alternatively, it wasn't because of her fear of David, but rather mishum biyasusa dahar ika, because she was coming down a mountain, and therefore she had to straddle the animal, otherwise she could fall. Which way, all of these things are expressing that she was rocheves because this was a situation of orcha in order to not fall off the animal. Says the Gemara, asking the following question, Ube araisa milo ksiv tamei, but in the Torah did it not state in other places tamei? Ella, says the Gemara, kol heicha dechi hadodi ninhu mishtoi beloshin nikia. When it is an equal amount of words, so therefore we then teach a more refined expression. However, if there is an additional words that would be used by teaching the refined expression, then we prefer to use even the more coarse type of expression of tamei. Why? Because we want to teach a lashon of kitzara. Why is that important? Kidam Rav Huna Marav. V'amar le am Rav Huna Amarav Mishum Rabbi Meir. La'olam yishne Adam leTalmidav derech kitzara. A person should always teach his children, meaning his students rather, who, when he teaches his students, he should teach them the derech kitzara, a concise language, so that the information be conveyed in the most effective way. Asked the Gemara though, are you going to say that only when the amount of words are exactly the same, then you prefer to teach a lashon of kavod, of a refined language? The words rocheves in the previous pasuk that we quoted by Avigal, v'hi rocheves ala chamor, the pasuk uses the word rocheves. And yet, the same amount of letters could have been used if it said Yosheves. Answers the Gemara, Rocheves ksiv, without the vav. Let's take a look at Rashi. First of all, the first Rashi that I want to take a look at is on the second wide line. V'kol heicha v'chulei. Rashi asks, V'hochi de le'el, before on Amud Aleph, it said, Ikem lelamed choshetzorich lechazer achalosh noki. There it said we went a deviation by then teaching, instead of the words of Tatmeya, we taught additional 8 letters to teach more a refined language. So that's where we teach the principle. Now there's Rashi coming to explain why over there we didn't teach the shorter expression. Why do we teach the longer expression? There Rashi says because we want to teach the lashon of naki, there the principle that it's important to teach with a refined, to teach it with a refined or language. Uveshar mekoymos, but in other places, ksiv, it's written lema lashon meguna v'kotzar, even a language that's coarse, because it is concise. To teach you, a person should teach his talmidim in a concise way. Because that lashon kitzara is going to be conveyed and more effective than if it's going to be a longer type of teaching. Next, Rashi, rocheves ksiv without the vav. The word yosheves is also without the vav. So what is the advantage? We should see lashon kitzara. It says Rashi, v'afagav demotzi lemichtav nami yosheves choser. Even though it's true, he could have also taught the word yosheves without the vav. Miu kol chaseiro shebatorah lidrosh hein boim. All of those words without the vav that are chaseiros, we doresh. V'kan limedcha b'chisaron zeh shetitfois lashon kitzara v'afilu hi meguna. And here we're coming to teach that which is chaser the vav in rocheves is that although it's going to be a coarse type of language, but we want to teach that derech kitzara is adif. Shaharei kan tofas lashon meguna v'kotzar. Back in the Gemara now says Hanhu, different maisim that took place with lashon of meguna versus lashon that would have been more refined. Hanhu trei talmidei dahava yaspe kamei de Rav. There were two students that were sitting before the Rebbe Rav. Chad Omar Shavisinon Hai Shemaitza Bedover Acher Mesankon. One expressed that we are exhausted from the sugya, the Shmaitza, like a Dover Acher, like a tired Dover Acher, meaning like a swine. He said, we're exhausted, we became exhausted like a tired Gedi. In other words, the first one, even though he didn't say outright a Chazir, he said Dover Acher, but still the choice of comparison was also considered to be coarse. And therefore it says, V'lo yishtoi Rab b'hadi dehech, that Rav, the Rebbe, did not speak to the one who expressed himself in such a coarse fashion. The Gemara brings another Maisa. Hanu trei talmidei dahavu yasbe kamei de Hillel. There were two students that were sitting before Hillel Hazoken. V'chad minayo Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And one of those students was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Another version, Va'amrei lo kamei de Rebbe v'chad minayo Rabbi Yochanan. And some say there were two students sitting in front of Rebbe, and one of those two students was Rabbi Yochanan. Chad omar mipnei ma boitzrin betaharo ve'ein moiskim betaharo. One asked, why is it that we're boitzrin betahara? That means to say that we're careful to use kalim to harvest the grapes, but we are not careful to use the kalim that are tahor to harvest olives. The word for harvest for grapes is used as boitzrin. Harvesting for olives is used as moiskin. When it comes to a fruit, when it becomes mukhshar letuma, to mekabel, to be susceptible to be mekabel tuma, it has to then first, once it's detached from its natural source, it's then has to become in contact with different liquids. In this case, it would be olive oil, or it would be the grape juice. So when it comes to the grapes, and they're harvesting the grapes, we must use kalim that are tahor, because the moisture from the grapes, which is the juice that comes out of the grapes, will be machshir, the grapes from makabel tuma. And therefore, it indeed would make it so that if the kalim were not going to be tahor, then it would become tameh. It would metamed the grapes. But when it comes to the zaysin, the olives, there it's different. The moisture that comes out of the olives is not considered to be olive oil that will be machshir the olives are coming to be susceptible from becoming tameh, and therefore we don't have a requirement to use kalim to harvest the olives. So this student said, in a refined way, he says, why is it that we are careful to use kalim that are tor to harvest the grapes, but not careful we don't need to then use kalim that are tahor to harvest the olives. Whereas the other student said, why are we careful to harvest grapes with kelim dar tahor, and yet when it comes to the harvesting of olives, we use kelim dar tameh? So that was a less refined type of language. Omar, so the Rebbe said, Muftach ani bezesha moira hara b'Yisrael. He says, I am going to be certain that this student who used a more refined language will then be teaching halacha in Yisrael, in Klal Yisrael. V'lo haya yomim mu'atim, and there wasn't much time that had passed. Ad shehara hara b'Yisrael, when this student ultimately did teach teachings in Klal Yisrael. He gave halachic rulings within Klal Yisrael. The Gemara now says another situation. Hanu talose kahani. There were 3 kahanim, also in a story, a maisa, showing that there was a coarse type of expression that was used. Hani tlase kahani, there were 3 kahanim. Chad amar luhu higiani kipul. There, each one is coming to express their portion of the lechem haponim. So one said, it arrived to me like a pool, like a bean. That was the type of size and shape of the lechem haponim that he received. The other one expressed that it arrived to me like a kezayis, like an olive. And the third one expressed that the lechem haponim came to him like the tail of a lizard, which is tamei. Bodku acharov umatzu boishemes psul. They searched after this third kohen who expressed himself in such a coarse way, and they found that he was taka pasul, that he has pasul lineage. I asked the Gemara, "V'hatanya ein boikim min hamizbech lamala." Once we have a kohen that is doing the avodim in the Beis Hamikdash, then we already don't check him afterwards because we assume that since the Lishkas Hagosis already checked him to enable him to do the avodah, then he has to be checked again, in which case he's not going to have a problem with his lineage. Answers the Gemara, Loteim Moshem es psul. Don't say that he had a psul in his lineage. Ella emo shachatz psul. He had a psul because of his gasus and his arrogance. The way he expressed himself, they found a psul. V'i bois emo. Alternatively, shiny hasom diu de'ero nafshe. Alternatively, this is different. Normally, indeed, we don't check after one's lineage, but here he ruined himself, which caused us to check him again. And when we checked again, we saw that we made a mistake the first time. Says the Gemara, V'bois emo. Says the Gemara weiter. Now the Gemara brings another maisa, which is not related to coarse language, but rather just to show how, indeed, in a situation when a person is not careful, then we can check and see that he is indeed a fraud. Says the Gemara, V'bois emo. Hahu aramoi dahavasolik va'ochel psachim yisham. There was a Nachri who would go up and eat korban Pesach in Yerushalayim. Omar, he said to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseiro, Ksiv, it says in the pasuk, Kol ben nechar lo yechal boy. The Nachri was quoting a pasuk, and it says, all Nachri, a ben nechar, is not allowed to eat the korban Pesach. It says in the Torah. He also quoted the second pasuk, Kol orel lo yechal boy. Also, one who is not with a bris milah cannot eat from the korban Pesach. Ve'ano kachil nemeshufei shufri. And I, as a nachri, would eat the korban Pesach, and I would eat from the very best. This is what he says to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseiro. Omar le Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseiro, mikasafu loch me'aliyah. Did they feed you from the fatty type of tail of the korban Pesach? Omar le loy. He said they didn't give that to me, that piece. Kisal kis lahasom emalu. When you go up there next time, tell them, safuli ma'aliyah. Feed me from the fatty tail, a choice piece of the korban. Kisolik, when this Nachri went up to Yerushalayim, Omar lehu ma'aliyah safuli. He said to them, give me to eat from the korban that has the fatty tail, the aliyah. Omrule, they said to him, aliyah kilagavoy salka, that goes up on the mizbeach. Omrule, they said to him, man omar lochachi, who told you that you should have the aliyah? Omar lehu, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseiro. Omru, they said to themselves, my high the common. Who is this that came before us? In other words, they realized that there's something wrong over here. They checked after him. They saw that he was a nachri, and they killed him. They sent a message back to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira that said as following: Shalom loch, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Shalom to you, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Da'at ben Nitzivin, that you are situated over there in the area called Nitzivin. U'mitzudoscha berusa b'Yushalayim, and your net was spread out in Yushalayim. In other words, we captured the one that you sent in Yushalayim, this Nachri, and we killed him. Says the Gemara weiter, going back to those languages that are coarse versus refined. Rav Kahana cholash. Rav Kahana was weak. He was sick. Shadru Rabbanon Rabbi Yoshua bereid Rav Yidi. They sent the Rabbanon. They sent Rabbi Yoshua bereid Rav Yidi. Omrule, they said to him, Zil b'doik my dine. Go check a certain din. He went and he saw that indeed he found that Rav Kahana had passed away. Kar'ei lilevushe, he rent his garment. Va'adre lekare la'achure, and he turned it so it would be on the other side, wouldn't be showing. Ubachi va'osi, and he was crying and he went. Omrule, they said to him, Nach nafshe, did Rav Kahana pass away? Now he didn't want to say to them abruptly that he passed away. Omar le, he said, Ano lo ka'imna, I'm not going to say, because it says in the Pasuk, Moitzi diba hu ksil, the one who speaks out, a diba is a fool. And therefore he didn't want to shock them and say in a way of trying to express to them a besura ra, and therefore he wanted to just hint to them so that they wouldn't have to then be told explicitly. Yoichan chakuka nafik likriyasa, another maisa of refined speech, says the Gemara. Yoichanon chakuka, he went out to check the fields in the kfarim, in the villages. Ki also, when he came back, amrule, they said to him, chitin nasu yafois. Was the wheat, did it grow yafois? Are they good wheat? Omar lehem sa'arim na'asu yafois. He said to them, sa'arim were good. In other words, he was hinting to them that the chitim are not good. In other words, he want to express in a refined way. Omrule, they said sarcastically, Tzei ubasir lesusim lachamorim. They said to him, why didn't you then announce that to the horses and the donkeys? For after all, sa'arim, barley, is horse food. Dirshu, it says in the Pasuk, ha-sa'arim va-teven lesusim v'la-rochesh. The sa'arim and the teven is given to the horses. And why aren't you using an expression of people's food? In other words, they had a bikaret, they had a criticism on him. My have le'lemeim. I asked the Gemara, what should he have said? He was being refined. He didn't want to say directly that the chitim are not good. So they said that the sorim are good. Says the Gemara, no, he could have said the following. Ishtake nasu chitin yafius. He could have said the year before the wheat was good. And that way he would be expressing human food and express it in a more refined way. Inami adoshim nasu yafos. Or he could have said, instead of sa'arim, he could have said adoshim, lentils are good. And that again would be an expression of refined language.